By 1943, the tide of war was turning in the sweeping dunes of North Africa. Victory's shadow stretched long and dark for the Axis, the once unstoppable Africa Corps, now a shadow of its former self, was in full retreat. On May 13th, in a dusty tent outside Tunis, the final act played out. Italian General Giovanni Mess, his uniform still crisp but his eyes hollow, signed the surrender. The Italo-German Army Group Africa ceased to exist. Over 250,000 soldiers marched into captivity. Their tanks, including those of the proud Arayat Division, were left behind, skeletal husks scattered across the desert. You can almost taste the gritty air, a mixture of sweat, sand, and gun oil. British tankers from Montgomery's 8th Army, fresh from shattering the Mareth Line, climbed from the hatches of their M3 Grant tanks. These were the mocked behemoths, tall and clumsy, but their 75mm guns had been decisive. Now, they shared cigarettes with American GIs who had landed in the West during Operation Torch. The Grant's role was already fading as the new M4 Shermans arrived in droves sleeker, more modern, with a fully rotating turret. But the Grant's legacy was secure. It had bridged a critical gap, its raw firepower compensating for its flaws in the crucible of desert combat. Weeks earlier, Field Marshal Rommel had been evacuated. From Europe, the Desert Fox reflected bitterly in his diary, writing, "The Americans' material superiority is overwhelming." He knew the truth. The industrial giant the Japanese Admiral Yamamoto had so feared was now fully awake, its arsenal pouring across the Mediterranean. And in the Pacific, that same giant was unleashing its fury. Guadalcanal had been secured in February after months of brutal jungle warfare, marking Japan's first major land defeat. Then, on April 18th, a devastating blow. American P-38 fighters, acting on decoded intelligence, intercepted and shot down the plane carrying Admiral Yamamoto himself from the White House. President Roosevelt announced it with grim satisfaction, gunned down like a rabbit. Yamamoto's own prophecy was coming true. American aircraft carriers, once decimated at Pearl Harbor, were now being built and launched at a speed Japan could never hope to match. New Essex-class carriers slid from the shipyards every few months. Yet, in Tokyo, the military leadership, blinded by a mix of arrogance and rigid adherence to the Bushido Code, ignored the warnings their most brilliant strategist had left behind. Yamamoto's successor, Admiral Menechi Koga, pressed on, seeking a war of attrition in the Solomon Islands. This strategy culminated in disaster. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, American pilots and anti-aircraft gunners, aided by superior radar, decimated the Japanese naval air forces in what became known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Over 600 Japanese planes were lost. The sleeping giant had become a rampaging colossus. Back in Europe, the victory in North Africa had opened a new front. On July 10, 1943, under a starry Mediterranean sky, Operation Husky began, the Allied invasion of Sicily. The initial landings were chaotic. Paratroopers were scattered by high winds, and gliders crashed into rocky hillsides. But as dawn broke, the main force hit the beaches. Landing craft braved machine gun fire from the cliffs as Montgomery's 8th Army stormed ashore. At Gela, American Rangers, led by Colonel William Darby, scaled sheer rock faces, silencing Italian coastal batteries with cold steel. American submarines, like the USS Harder, prowled the shipping lanes, sinking vital transports and tankers. Yamamoto's ghost-haunted Japanese strategy sessions. His successor's plans crumbled into ruin at the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944, the largest naval battle in history, where the U.S. Navy annihilated the remnants of the Imperial Japanese Navy. As autumn chilled the Italian peninsula, the Allied grind north continued. In January 1944, they reached the formidable Gustav Line, anchored by the mountain fortress of Monte Cassino. The ancient abbey at its peak was reduced to rubble by Allied bombers, but elite German paratroopers dug into the ruins, turning the slopes into a killing field. American infantry charged through mud and minefields, but their supporting tanks bogged down. It was a brutal attritional fight. Finally, in May, after 4 bloody battles, Polish troops captured the monastery, opening the road to Rome. The Eternal City was liberated on June 4th, but the giant's greatest stride was yet to come. Just 2 days later, on June 6, 1944, dawn broke gray and stormy over the English Channel. Operation Overlord was unleashed. 156,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy. At Point du Hoc, American Rangers scaled 100-foot cliffs under a hail of fire to silence German gun emplacements. Amphibious DD Sherman tanks swam ashore, some sinking in the heavy surf, but others making it to the beach to blast open German bunkers. Rommel, now commanding German forces in Normandy, had warned Hitler of the invasion, but the Atlantic Wall was incomplete. The Desert Fox, who had once respected Allied tenacity, now faced their overwhelming power. The wall cracked, and through the breach poured the full might of Allied industry. By July, over 2,000 tanks were ashore, including the British Sherman Firefly, whose 17-pounder gun could finally pierce a Panther tank head-on. Rommel himself was wounded in an air attack on July 17th, and would later be forced to commit suicide for his connection to the plot to kill Hitler. The end was now a matter of time. In the Pacific, the noose tightened with the horrific, bloody battles for Iwo Jima and Okinawa. B-29 super fortresses, marvels of American engineering, rained fire on Japanese cities. In Europe, Allied armies pushed toward Germany from the west, while the Soviets advanced from the east. The sleeping giant Yamamoto had warned of was now dictating the final, brutal terms of the war. As atomic clouds gathered over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the world was left to wonder. Could it have all ended differently if the warnings of men like Yamamoto and Rommel had been heeded? The sands of Africa and the waves of the Pacific offer a chilling answer, whispering of the price of hubris and the dawn of a new, uncertain age.